Security services in the UK say scores of Brits are fighting in Syria and could use their weapons know-how to cause havoc when they come back home. Well, this is just one part of a wide-ranging report into key terrorist threats faced by Britain that extend to biological weapons attacks and cybercrime. RT's Sarah Firth is live now in London. Sarah, what are the key concerns then raised in this report?
Well, it's the first annual report on the UK's counter-terrorism strategy, and in it they highlighted the growing security threat from Syria, where Al-Qaeda affiliates were attracting hundreds of fighters from Europe. Now, let's take a little look at some of what the report says. And they said, as and when UK residents return home, there's a risk that they may carry out attacks using skills that they've developed overseas. Now, these are concerns that aren't only being highlighted by the British government, but are also being highlighted by other European members as well. Recently, we saw the Dutch heighten their security threat level as they said that they thought they had around 100 foreign fighters that had gone to Syria. And these are also concerns that I think have been echoed by France as well. So certainly not just a problem concerning Britain, but one obviously that we've seen highlighted in this counter-terrorism strategy report, and certainly I think a lot of concern amongst the British authorities that we're seeing these young British people fighting in the war zone.
So what does this tell us about the state of European and of course British security at the moment then?
Well, look, this is the report that was released this week, but this is something that is already happening, that there are already fighters there, and I think the concern for authorities is that we're going to see these fighters returning home and using the skills that they may have acquired in that situation. Now, I'm joined by freelance Syrian journalist Malik Al-Abda. Thank you very much for joining us. We were speaking about this subject a couple of weeks before the report was released. And obviously, this is something that is already going on. And I know you've spoken to the friends of the young British man who was actually the first confirmed British fighter who died over in Syria. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, yeah, Ibrahim al-Mazwagi was only 21 when he died in Syria, and already he was a veteran of the Libyan war against Colonel Gaddafi. And I mean, despite his young age and despite the fact that he studied in the UK, lived in the UK all his life, he's very much, through the friends that I've spoken to, he's very much a very British in many ways. He's a London boy. Despite that, I think he found the allure of jihad in Syria very attractive. And ultimately, it proved to be a fatal attraction because he was ultimately killed in Homs.
British authorities are obviously very concerned. We've seen it highlighted in this counter-terrorism report. How worried should they be? How much of a threat do you think this is to Britain?
Well, I think that the report said there were probably around 100 fighters. I think the real number is probably higher. But it depends whether we classify them as British-born or simply happen to be living in the UK. If they simply happen to be living in the UK, I think the number would be higher. But I think there are also two levels of threats here. There are Arabs who live in the UK or have lived for a long time in the UK, who have gone to Syria or Libya and have fought in those countries. I think they would be secondary, they would be considered as a secondary threat as far as the security services are concerned. I think what would be most concerning for the British security services are British Muslims of Asian descent, either Pakistani or Bangladeshi or Indian, who might go to places like Syria, because they're the ones in the past 10 years or so who've been involved in the most dangerous terror threats in the UK.
You spoke about Ibrahim having fought in Libya beforehand, and we're seeing British people, you know, going over to what is a war zone in Syria. What's the appeal? What's the allure? Why are these young British men going over to fight in a civil war?
Well, if you're a practicing Muslim and you believe that jihad represents one of the pillars of Islam and it represents a large part of your belief, then Syria is a very attractive place to go and fight. I mean, for a previous generation, perhaps the war in Afghanistan against the Soviets was the one to go to. And then in the 90s, you had Bosnia and Chechnya. But now you've got Syria. So every 4 or 5 years, there is a particular battlefield, a particular location that attracts jihadists from around the world. And it just so happens that now it is Syria, partly because it's relatively easy to get there, but also because there is a lot of historical and religious importance attached to Syria and to Damascus especially, the place where you know, it says in the Quran where Jesus Christ is going to come back, and there's going to be Armageddon and so on. And many of the jihadists who go and fight in Syria actually believe in these things, and they believe that Syria has a special religious significance.
Okay, Malik, thank you very much for joining us. I know you described it as a tsunami. I don't think anyone could have had any idea of just how complex and how far-reaching the implications of what is happening in Syria right now will be. We heard the UN envoy to Syria speaking today, calling for the desperately urgent need for all sides to come together and once again try and find a resolution to the conflict.
Sarah Firth, live in London. Thank you very much indeed for that.